All right, folks, it's Wednesday, December the 13th. At least it's not Friday the 13th. And it is about a week and a half before Christmas. So, of course, a lot of people are out there going shopping. And all along those lines, I had the pleasure of talking to mom yesterday. And I think that she said her and my two living aunts will be heading out to go shopping sometime. I believe it's either tomorrow or Friday, but they're going to get in some of their shopping as well as people are still doing that, getting out there and getting their shopping season on and all along those lines. So definitely that is one thing that is going on in terms of just daily activities from people in general. But of course, there's a number of news things that are taking place as well. As a matter of fact, the COP28 climate summit ended with deal to transition away from fossil fuels. So that is something that took place in Dubai. So that is definitely something that we are seeing as the COP28 ended with global leaders saying oil, coal, and gas are doomed. So they are saying that we have to get away from those forms of energy and all along those lines. But it'll be interesting to see what they are recommending replaces them and all in that kind of space. But that is something that I'm seeing in the news. And there are also, as I said yesterday, rifts between Biden and Netanyahu that are spilling into apparently public view because Biden was scrutinized for saying Israel is losing global support amid indiscriminate bombing. So that is something else that we are seeing as well. And Israel has begun pumping seawater into those Hamas Gaza tunnels. So definitely that is saying something that we're seeing in the world as people are talking about that particular conflict as well. So definitely that is something that people are paying attention to, just like they're paying attention to a key vote on the Biden impeachment inquiry as Republicans are uniting behind that investigation. So it sounds like there are investigations around Hunter Biden, investigations and court cases around Trump, and a number of other things. So maybe the political season is going to be a court season as well. So that is something that is going on in that space. And Argentina bonds have climbed after President Javier Milei debuts his shock economic plan. So he is to devalue the peso by over 50% as part of an emergency economic reforms. I can only imagine what that would be like if we tried to devalue the dollar by 50% or something along those lines. So I can definitely understand why folks might be shocked by that particular move and all along those lines. But that is something else that I saw in the world news. And Ukraine faces a daunting winter after Zelensky can't convince the Republicans to give some more money. So that is something else that is going on. So Ukraine looks toward anxious winter as war with Russia remains in a stalemate. And if you're wondering about another part of the world, Rishi Sunak apparently needs to walk a tightrope between his Tory factions. So the Britain wants to send asylum seekers 4,000 miles away to Rwanda, and some people are saying stop the boats. So it'd be interesting to see what folks have to say about that as well. And the Houthis, it's not just the Hamas folks, but there are other people that are doing terrorist acts in the Middle East. And the Houthis apparently hit a tanker with missiles in the Red Sea. And a French frigate downed drones. So definitely, it looks like the Houthis are getting involved and even further involved as well. And I believe that they come out of Yemen, and definitely that is something that is going on. And of course, there's all kinds of political turmoil and political changes in power. So, in a sea change for Poland, a new government has been sworn in. So, Poland's Law and Justice Party lost power after 8 years of authoritarian rule. So, it definitely looks like there's going to be new leadership in that part of the world. And China's Xi has pushed more trust with Vietnam after Hanoi's moves closer to Washington. So definitely looks like they are trying to get some inroads into that region. So Xi has asked Vietnam to stop outsider efforts to mess up the region. And that is what they were saying we would do is mess up the region if I guess the United States gets further involved and all in that space. And the U.S. has announced new sanctions on Russia's weapon suppliers during this time that Zelensky was visiting Washington. So, U.S. sanctions China, Turkey, and UAE firms for supporting Russia and all in that kind of space. So, definitely looks like a lot of things are going on in these military conflicts, including over there in Israel. Because in occupied West Bank, there was an Israeli military raid on Jenin that entered its second day, and looks like it might have killed 6 in that area, according to Palestinian officials. So definitely looks like it's not just in Gaza. Now it might be even expanding into the West Banks and other parts of that area as well. So, and Israel says that the bodies of 2 hostages have been recovered in Gaza. So it does look like they have found some of the bodies as well. And then, in terms of the border conversation, the White House is open to new border expulsion laws, as well as mandatory detention and increased deportation in their talks with Congress. So, definitely, that is something else that is going on. And Menendez says that the Biden border proposals are the height of absurdity. That was his quote and not mine. So, that's something else that is going on as well. And of course, the Pope has not been feeling all that well. And the Pope says he wants to simplify the papal funeral rites, and he wants to be buried outside the Vatican. So he said that he would like to be buried in the Rome Basilica, not in the Vatican. So that's something else that is going on just in terms of people's desires and all in that space. And Japan soldiers have been found guilty of sexual assault. So Japan courts have convicted former soldiers in a landmark sexual assault case that grabbed their social media and all along those lines. So apparently somebody won their sexual assault case, and now they're hoping that the Japanese military changes so that others don't suffer. So that is something else going on. And in terms of Ukraine, and I'll bring in panelists and see what they've got to say. Ukraine's biggest wireless service was knocked offline in an attack. So Ukraine is facing heavy attacks from air and cyberspace, while Zelensky is in the U.S., like I said, pressing for more funds. There might be some things that I get to in terms of United States news and all along those lines, but I try to get some stuff worldwide. And I do have my buddy Steve, so let me bring in Steve and see what he's got to say and all along those lines. So I brought up a couple of things. We've also got Rick Rosner with us and Lee Newton Rhodes, but I thought I'd turn it over to you for a second. How's it going?
Yeah, Mark, sorry I missed the monologue. I've got another meeting coming up, but yeah, you pretty much hit everything that I was going to talk about today. I guess my opening, and I'll try to open up tomorrow. I said the next couple months is going to be kind of dodgy for me. I'm definitely going to try to be here on Fridays, but what I would say is that first of all, the COP summit. I think the continued effort to cut carbon emissions, and I think innovation can be a big part of that. Even in North Carolina, where we live, there's a lot of focus on clean tech investment. Whether it's electric vehicle manufacturers like VinFast or Wolfspeed manufacturing semiconductors. A lot of these jobs coming back. Even in Morrisville, where I live, Forge Nano, a lithium battery manufacturer, has provided over $165 million of investment and 200 jobs over the next few months, a few years actually. But I think also entrepreneurship, right? I mean, whether it's carbon capture technologies, there was a thing on 60 Minutes about that. Bill Gates has invested in one. And there's a book, How to Prevent a Climate Disaster, by Bill Gates. I would really recommend anyone that's listening to World Edition. It gives really good insight in terms of the kinds of things that are doing out there, whether it's plant-based meats, sensors, smart city technologies, Internet of Things. All of these technologies can actually now be used to harness more efficiencies in the environment. So hopefully we'll see a focus on that, because if you create more companies around the country and world, you also create many, many more new jobs. And meanwhile, the other major topic is, of course, the UN resolution asking for a ceasefire in Gaza. Israel has allowed for a checkpoint for more humanitarian aid into Israel, but the United States actually resisted a UN security resolution just a few days ago. So the war in Gaza and Israel continues. It does seem to be an impasse, and U.S. foreign policy kind of wanting humanitarian aid but not willing to stand by a ceasefire, which is hurting Joe Biden with Muslim American voters. Let's not forget in Michigan, there were 200,000 Arab Americans, and Joe Biden won by 150,000 votes. So, if you look at even in North Carolina, it's happening. So in these swing states, it could be very, very difficult road to hoe for the president, whose poll numbers continue to decline. And while all of this is going on, we've got the war in Ukraine and a setback in the Senate. This was, I think, last week, asking that they hold back on funding aid to Ukraine, the $1 billion requested, in exchange for border control kind of measures. So as we end the year, Mark, I would say that once again, the word is turbulence.
There's definitely some turbulent times. So speaking of turbulent times, I want to bring in somebody that is not all that turbulent, but he's got some good news that I've got to share with him. And just really quickly, as I also just want to mention, we do have merchandise with the Pod TV store, podtv.tv, and you can go to the store and get mugs and shirts, and I think there's hoodies and other things. And I do know that Kim and others are working on putting together a bookstore that will feature some of the guests and some of the regular panelists that have books from the show. I think Rick might have a book, and I need to double check that and all along those lines. But the good news I had for you, Rick, and y'all in that space is that I was talking to a dear friend, and I was telling him about what we've got going on here at Pod TV, and I was telling him about some of the shows. I told him about World Edition. Of course, I told him about the shows that I'm involved in and everything else. And Rick, your PR team and your team of people that help you with your show, they must be doing a spectacular job, because when I mentioned Naked at Night, the words that I heard from a couple of friends was, I heard about that show. So apparently you're doing a good job of getting the word out there and all along those lines. So.
But being naked at night means I'm barely awake right now.
True that.
And, I wish the Pope well. I've always been a night person. And the Pope, as a much younger man, was a bar bouncer, as was I. So I support bouncers who go on to greatness.
Yeah, just really quickly, what is your thoughts of what Steve brought up? Because I do know that on a couple of our shows, you've brought up AI. He definitely brought up AI. That was part of the strike, because that was even part of what the entertainers, and you're part of that entertainer community, was concerned about, was rights that they can hold and what they can do. But I'd love to hear your take on AI.
Well, I believe that we're looking at, I call it the end of the world, but I don't mean that we're going to be wiped out. I just mean that normal human life is going to look, humans have lived the same way for 10,000 years. We couple up to make kids, we farm, we make cities, and the coming technology in the near future, by the end of this century, will just make life way, way different. I think with climate change, the solutions are going to be weird and science fictional in the medium term, and will involve people just staying home. If you remember from The Matrix, that people thought they were outside living, just normal lives, but they were really in pods dreaming that they were. And I believe there's going to be some version of that where people aren't going to go as many places, because AI and other technologies are going to make it possible for increased levels of telecommuting. People like to talk about how gas got down to $2 a gallon in 2020. And that's because nobody went anywhere, because we were locked down for COVID. I think you're going to see similar things happen on a more permanent basis as people, I mentioned this a lot, but sex among young people is down 25% compared to when I was young, because people stay home and stream entertainment instead of, trying to go out and hook up. I think it will be more and more frowned upon to take airplane flights, because airplanes are incredibly polluting. we saw that happen a little bit with celebrities like the Kardashians, flying out of the Van Nuys airport to fly 30 miles and, spewing out a huge amount of gunk into the air just on their private jets to take a trip that would, they could do in a car in half an hour.
Yeah, speaking of that, and really just real quickly, I was going to bring in somebody that has attended some of these conferences that deal with energy, and she might have some thoughts about these energy rules. But one of our founders has had the privilege of going to some of these conferences and actually learning firsthand what is going on in that space. So I was going to bring in Kim Calhoun, and at some point I do need to ask Steve, even though I have an idea of what they are, I would love his take on smart cities. But before I get to the smart city conversation, definitely want to bring in Kim Calhoun and all along those lines, because Kim, you've had the pleasure of going to these conferences, and you've actually sent the link that some of us have watched at least part of, and all along those lines. But were you surprised that the leaders are wanting to push back from fossil fuel and all in that space at this COP28 conference? And what are some of the things that you have learned? Because like I said, you have been in touch with a lot of people that are in that energy space, and definitely you follow this on a regular basis as a person that is interested as an engineer and just in general and all along those lines.
Well, I'm definitely no expert. Thank you, Mark, for that opening. And again, I'm no expert in any of this. I attend the meetings just to hear and listen to what is really going on from the horse's mouth, as opposed to the people on regular media who don't even attend these meetings and tend to make up things. So a lot of times I like to do that just to compare notes and hear what the lies are or what they're making up. Because then, when I hear someone in our network saying something, I know that they might just be repeating what they're hearing on Fox or CNN, as opposed to what really happened. There's a lot, but when you talk about the pushback on fossil fuel or whether we have enough or not, we have plenty. And what we ought to do is bring Frank back in to discuss this with us, because he actually reports on the news on this every day. He is one person who does show up to these conferences. But here's the thing, there's this idea that, the gas industry doesn't really want to go towards the alternative, which is, the electric vehicles or cleaner and greener gas. Other countries are going that way. The U.S. should have been going this way a long time ago. There's a complaint, the batteries, cause more damage to our environment. But there are other alternatives, and other countries have done it very successfully, Greenland being one of them. But it won't hurt the gas industry, because ironically, a lot of the gas and oil companies have been investing in the alternative industry. The gas and oil companies, decided to start installing chargers at their gas stations so that there's more chargers available, conveniently available. They, I think, are also probably individually and personally invested in the industry and maybe stocks and things like that. The increase in gas prices kind of benefited them in two ways. It will push people to go alternative, which they're invested in. And people are paying more at the gas tank, which lines their pockets. They didn't need to go up because of a shortage like the media and Trump tried to spread fear about. There was never any shortage. They pumped, use your brains, people. They pumped gas for months and years during COVID, and we didn't use it. So there's been plenty. The problem was the executives decided to use all of this hoopla in their advantage, so everyone would point blame and fear at the president, and they lined their pockets of billions of dollars in profits the past 2 years. So take some of this in consideration, but please just use your mind a little bit. Don't listen to Fox or CNN on these data. There are plenty of places to go to. CERAWeek. There is the Energy research foundations that you can go to see this information. But I will tell you this, rarely do I see any of those guys who are talking about it there. So kind of, if you want more information about it, we'll bring Frank in and see if he'll share. And, just bring people up to date, because we need to know the truth about this information.
Right.
Gas and oil is always going to be there. That's what I tell people. There's no fear of losing it. Do I think it's a safer or better way to produce our energy? No. They use fracking. Fracking is one of the most dangerous ways to extract the gas and oil. And to me, it's very invasive to our personal properties that we own, because somebody can go down a few feet and over to your property and start pumping. And fracking, I think, causes a lot of foundation problems with our earth, as well as it is the most dangerous rig there is. I mean, the accidents and fatalities that happen on fracking sites are tremendous compared to the other oil rigs, and the other oil rigs have some pretty serious accidents as well. So I don't think we're ever going to lose it as a valued investment. I do believe in the alternatives. Hydrogen was always my favorite. And I'm looking at Colombia, South America, and they have stopped all expedition of any oil and gas contracts right now. They are going completely green and alternative. That's been the latest news there. I have spoke with people who are doing contracts for the alternatives. So it is true. It's true information. And I'll try to talk more about it when Sierra Week gets closer.
That makes a lot of sense and everything, and we definitely hope to hear from that, and we'll definitely reach out to Frank as well. I did see your hands up, Rick, and everything, and I did say that I was going to ask Steve really quickly as well if he wanted to go into, and maybe not as much details, but I've heard you talk about it. I've heard a lot of people talk about smart cities, and I do have an idea what they are, and I know that we even have smart buses here, and sometimes the bus drivers.
I'm actually a member for years.
Yeah. Well, let me. Well, Kim raised some great points, and I'll close out on that before I leave today, but I'll be back up hopefully tomorrow. But what I'll say, first of all, what a smart city is basically leveraging sensors and data to get real-time information that enhances the quality of life for residents in cities. So I'll give you a practical example. Recently in Morrisville, where we live, I chair our Smart City Committee, and we actually won national awards for something as simple as, when the parks would flood or they were too wet, people would have to call a number or go to the website. And by the time they got there, it was too late. The gates were closed. Well, now we've automated that process so that there's notification immediately sent out. The data is captured. That goes directly to the Morrisville app, and then residents can actually see in real time, and the gates would automatically close. So a staff member wouldn't have to go all the way and make sure that those fields are wet. We're doing that to manage vehicle counts. You can order on-demand transit through your phone. All these things are the ways, but also as it relates to sustainability, you can actually use these sensors to manage energy efficiency of buildings. Now, we talked about AI. Where AI can become valuable is the machine can be trained to learn things, and you can bring that into these initiatives. So, for example, normally in any city, wherever you are listening to this show, even around the world, and I'm sure this could be going on in Canada. If you have a question, you would normally call a 1-800 number, and you would ask a question about when is my waste picked up or when is this picked up. But now AI can stand alone, what they call 311 call centers, where they could be automated with chatbots. And this is already happening, where you would call. If that same person will call again, the machine could learn and train and text me saying, Steve, do you have the same question? So these are things that can bring efficiencies, but there will be job loss. The basic, Hasbro just announced 1,100 jobs gone because of, profits being down. IBM this year announced 8,000 white-collar jobs being gone. You're going to see a lot of jobs displaced. But as John Chambers said, who was the former CEO and chairman of Cisco, there'll be many more new jobs created by startups in AI. Out of the 16 companies that Chambers has invested in, 3 are AI companies, and they're all billion-dollar companies. $79 billion of venture money in the United States of America going into artificial intelligence. If you're an entrepreneur and you have an app, I'm seeing already a floodgate of AI entrepreneurs coming in. So it's exciting times. I think it's how the technology, but some good points have been raised about, what does it mean in terms of our ingenuity, our creativity? If the AI gets in the wrong hands, can it be weaponized? What about deep fakes that could be used in political campaigns? Who's going to regulate the data? These are all issues I think that we need to, bring up in the next.
No, that makes sense. I know you're the head out and everything, but Steve, I'm just wondering, maybe Jacoby can even answer it as well. How much can AI control things that happen that are natural disasters? We know what happened in Hawaii. That was a major disaster and everything. And even here where me and Jacoby are based in Durham, there was a recent mini disaster, but it definitely impacted people's lives. I think it was something like 40,000 gallons of a sewage waste that was broken after that line and that tree fell down on it, and all along those lines. So I'm just wondering, how much can AI detect things like that?
That's a great way for me to end my perspective on it. And I do think this year we're going to try to bring in more guests to talk about AI at least once a week or once a quarter or a couple times a month. But let me answer that question. So recently I've had a discussion with an entrepreneurial company called City Data AI that's come up with an AI solution for that specific purpose. So they've created these personalized chatbots that cities and states can use to basically compile all of this data. So let's use North Carolina for an example, since that's where you live. We have a lot of storms and hurricanes that come in, right? When they hit, we know these are the areas of the state where the power grid was weak, where there were power outages. These are the areas where there was destruction. So it can help in our resilience strategy because the machine could actually learn. You could train the machine to take all the data I talked to Josh Stein about this, who's hopefully going to be the next governor. The AI could search and say, okay, if the Category 8 storm hit, where in North Carolina would there most likely be power outages? So you can better prepare in terms of hurricane preparedness and what we call resilience. So these are the ways where the technologies can get very powerful and the data can be collected and the machine can learn and train so that we can be better prepared for disaster recovery, right? Anyway, I've gone on and on, but that's how, Mark.
That makes sense and everything. Rick, you had a question or a thought?
No, well, a couple areas for AI. One is, we have 1.2 guns for every American. It's not like we're going to make all the guns go away. But when somebody goes nuts and shoots up a bunch of people with an AR-15, almost always there are a bunch of news stories afterwards talking about how everybody thought that person had a whole record, was throwing off all sorts of red flags that he might do that, and there wasn't enough coordination among police agencies, the FBI, local law enforcement. I think if AI can make information sharing more efficient, you might be able to flag more of these shooters before they do their shooting. A second thing is resource sharing, where in LA, we've got a discussion going on right now about how many when you put up a new apartment building, how many parking spaces do you need? In traditional America for, the second half of the 20th century till now, it's people in acceptance, New York City, for instance, almost you expect every adult to have a car, and that's going to change. That in the future, we're just and AI can help coordinate where if people are going to share cars. There's this author, Cory Doctorow, who talks about how he needs to use a power drill twice a year. And it's crazy that he should have just a drill sitting around his house and not be used, except for like 0.01% of the time. And in the future, AI can coordinate. There can be like community power tools for the very rare times you need to use a power tool. There can be all sorts of resource sharing that may reduce consumption.
Yeah, that makes sense. Hey, Jacoby, just really quickly, because I did
Real quickly, Mark, can we get a quick we get a thank you. Can
Yeah, I
we
was
get
going to get to that for sure.
well, no, just for Sasha. Well, I have to leave, but maybe tomorrow. I'd like Sasha today and maybe even tomorrow. Just give us an update in Ukraine. But I've got to run. But Sasha, it's great to see you, and I'll see you guys tomorrow morning. Thank you so much. Great job.
Yeah, good
Well,
job.
can I add one more thing that we talk about reducing consumption, but we're actually producing more fossil fuel in America now than ever before. 2022 was a record. This year is a broke that record. In 2024, we're going to be producing even more oil than ever before.
Yeah, really quickly, and I was going to get to you, Sasha, about Ukraine and everything, but Jacoby, do you think that AI could stop or at least help us in finding out about things like what happened in New Orleans with Katrina way back when, or even what happened recently here with that sewage break that caused that 40,000 dump and everything, 40,000 gallon dump, or all along those lines? Do you think that, because I know you're in that space of doing research around AI on a regular basis, but what is your thoughts about this as well?
Well, AI has been used to help out the weather forecast in terms of data compilation, and it can be used to try and pick out weak areas within our own infrastructure and figure out problems there. I mean, in all honesty, the one thing that Rick was just talking about in terms of gunshots, there is the thing that we try to utilize in Durham. I mean, there is a problem with it, and it isn't advanced enough because the issues with it. But ShotSpotter is actually using AI to detect not only the gunshots but the areas themselves where high crime is there. But it does have false alarms and issues with it. But it's a matter of the technology improving, and as the technology improves, these things will come into play, and those false alarms and those issues will definitely disappear. But yes, AI, everything that we've talked about in terms of AI and its advancement and the technology and how it's going to take away jobs, how it can be utilized in figuring out consumption and ways to manage that consumption. All those things are coming, and it's coming at a very rapid pace. And the amount of money that Steve was talking about earlier that's being invested, NVIDIA being blocked by the U.S. government from selling chips over in China, which not only does affect their stock a little, but the thing is the understanding from a governmental level how quickly it's going is a positive thing to at least applaud the government on. I mean, we never really applaud the government or say anything great about them, because yes, it has problems, but just to point out the understanding that yes, this is something that we need to get ahead of, because we can't sit behind and just let AI take off and forget that the programmers, the once it hits that singularity point where it's training its own self, we've lost the match. We've lost the game because of the fact that we're no longer in control of AI, and the data that goes in AI, we have to figure a way to monitor that data and being able to have a back end to be able to program whatever technology comes out of AI, and AI not being able to rewrite the code on top of that back end code. I mean, there's just so many things that we have to look out for AI because of the fact that we have to realize, and I tried to say this example before, is that we used to travel in a horse and buggy for thousands of years up until 1903 when Ford created the car. From 1903, we're now up to to 2023, so 120 years. So in 120 years, we're now at flying cars. So if you think about, we went from horse and buggy for 1,000 years, but now with the advancement of technology, in 120 years, we're now able to fly across the globe. We're able to travel across the globe by sea. We're able to utilize flying personal cars. We have machines right now with hoverboards and so on and so forth. So thinking about just the advancement in travel technology, now with the advancement If you think about, well, computers came on board. If you go back to was it 1930s, 30s and 40s, when the computer really just the big wheel and tape and everything else. And now think about how we have a little cell phone in our pocket. That's less than 100 years in terms of the technology and the way that it's expanding. So now think about AI and how fast it can grow. AI has been out there for a little while in terms of creating bots. Yes, AI in games, but they can make AI in games really just impossible. But it's just the technology. We have to stay in front of it.
Yeah, along the same lines, and I had a quick question. I did see your hand, Rick, and everything, but Sasha, one of the things that you oftentimes talk about on the Ukraine, Russia, China show is the meat grinder. I've heard people, including Rick's friend, talk about the meat grinder because you're usually talking about it in the sense of the Russian soldiers, but I've also heard people saying that it is a meat grinder for the Ukrainian soldiers and the Ukrainian population as well. And even Kim earlier in the chat was talking about the humanity of war. So I guess the question I've got for you is, do you think that whether it's Ukraine or the Israel-Palestine conflict, that we will get to a point where it becomes almost like the Terminator and it's not even our bodies that are being sacrificed, but it's these robots and computers that are actually doing the fighting for us? And is that something that you think can influence even the war that we are in, whether it's Israel or whether it's Ukraine? So I'm just wondering, do you think that there is going to be more of the robots fighting for the humans and all along those lines, or is that just the things of science fiction, in your opinion?
So far, it's mostly science fiction. It could be implemented. Actually, the technology exists. There is no reason why it could be done now. But it seems to me that there are some problems with, for example, yesterday Israel lost 8 soldiers. It's the heaviest loss of Israel since the beginning of operation. And there was apparently ambush of Palestinians that Israeli soldiers were trapped. So if that could be done against live soldiers, probably it could be done also for some kind of a robot that would fight. But I really don't see. Look, the development of new war technology and machines, it's a natural process. And anything, whatever gives one of the side's advantages, measurable and tangible advantages, obviously will be used, and quite quickly. For example, look at the proliferation of drones. I mean, the technology has been around now for some time, but however, only now, especially in the Ukraine-Russia war, it became probably decisive factor, and it's developing very quickly in terms of military might, the number of the explosive materials that can carry. Now I've heard that the Russians are developing a technique where they put the jet engine to the drone so they can fly 3 times as fast as the existing drones. So yeah, there are war technologies that are very, very developing and very fast.
Just really quick, and like I said, just your hand, Rick, and everything, but just really quick and everything. Sasha, I've been hearing a lot of the experts, and Kim talks about how you get the experts from the different sides, the right and the left, the Republicans and the Democrats, talking about this war being at a stalemate. And as a Canadian that is of Ukrainian descent, are you concerned that the war is at a stalemate? And do you see this being a long haul war, or do you think that it is some sort of ending that is nearby? Because I have heard a couple of the world experts talking about it be us being at a stalemate in that particular war. But I'd love to hear your take as to where we are.
There are, in my opinion, 3 scenarios. Is one, that Ukraine will continue to fight and slowly will starting to take over because Russia is exhausted and cannot really move even an inch. Even that US is no longer will provide help to Ukraine, it still doesn't change a picture on the front lines. Number two scenarios is that Ukraine, if Russia will be able to muster absolutely incredible bombardment of Ukrainian cities and killing every day, say 35,000 people, in that scenario, Ukraine will have to capitulate. I don't see any other scenario that they either continue to fight and hopefully win, but at least not to lose, and capitulation. Putin will not accept anything less than capitulation. The third variation is that Putin will immediately stop any attacks on Ukraine, will give Ukraine all its territories, including Donbass and Crimea, in exchange for friendship between Ukraine and Russia. And on certain conditions, will create a united front, which will unite Russian army and Ukrainian army into one whole, which will then provide Putin with a 3 million strong army that went through a real war, highly motivated and trained. And with that army, he will put NATO an ultimatum. Immediately close NATO, get out of all countries, NATO back in their own countries, and then they will, with proliferation of BRICS countries, creating the gold-baked currency, then they will make an ultimatum to United States, get out from everywhere in the world, including Europe, Asia, Far East, the Israel region, just anything, just get out and just stay inside U.S. borders, defend against Canada and Mexico, and that's the end of story. And probably give Alaska back to Russia.
The stalemate is a Russian talking point. Now, for the past couple of months, yeah, it has been stalemated, but the talking point is, well, since it's stalemated, it's always going to be a stalemate that just kills more and more people, and you might as well make peace and give that territory to Russia.
It's impossible. You know why? Because Putin will not accept anything short of capitulation. He is not going to take, okay, here is yours and this is mine, and take this. No, it's complete and full capitulation. That's all he needs.
And Russia can't keep fighting indefinitely, in that Russia doesn't have great industrial capacity. They have half our population. They've got not even in the top 12, I think, in GDP. They can't, they can keep going for another couple of years, but I don't know that they could, without the help of other countries, China and Turkey. And so I want to talk about Gaza quickly. There's nothing good about the Gaza war except that Gaza is tiny, and Israeli forces control more than half of the territory in North Gaza, probably more than a third of the territory in South Gaza. So at least that war is limited in duration, because the Israelis, they have 300,000 troops, Hamas maybe 30,000. So there can't be a stalemate there. That'll end soon.
But Rick, you say that there can't be a stalemate, but one of the things that I've seen just in observing it as a reporter and observer of society is that it seems like there are additional forces that are coming into play. We know that the Houthis are coming from Yemen. I think I just heard or announced today that there are attacks on some of the West Bank cities. So it sounds like it is a war that has expanded beyond just Israel and Gaza. So if I'm incorrect and all along those lines, let me know. But it does sound like it is an expanding war.
I can't speak much to that, except that what you're talking about is missiles being fired into Israel and at U.S. ships, and those things are, in terms of destructive capacity, fairly limited. That Israel has the Iron Dome defense. network, and I don't think the additional,
I guess what I'm
help.
asking, and just hoping that has some thoughts around this as Sasha, is that if you are attacking, I think I've heard French ships being attacked, American ships being attacked, and all of this, is this not possibly leading toward what some people have speculated, both with Ukraine and Israel, which is that it becomes a World War III, because you're not even attacking the two that are involved, you're attacking outside forces and all along those lines. So that's what my fear, as somebody that is not a parent. I know, Jacoby, you are a parent, but I do have my nephews. That's my fear, is that we are expanding it and it becoming a bigger conflict.
Well, let me just say, historically, the U.S. has put up with a bunch of attacks, some of them heinous, without going to full war against the countries that, we had passenger jets shot down. We had the Marine barracks blown up under Reagan, and that didn't turn into full-scale war.
Now, I don't think this is going to expand out to a full-scale war. I think this is what's happening. What started it all was Russia going into Ukraine and the response from that. And I don't think the Ukraine-Russia war will be the one that goes on forever. I think that one will come to a head, because I've heard reports that, Putin's goal is to wait the U.S. out, basically, because the money going in to help Ukraine, if that money dries up, then other countries dry up, and then yes, Ukraine is taken over. But the thing is, as long as that flow is still there, Ukraine can hold out and actually win this, and that is what we want, because again, that first domino falling being Ukraine. You have the Baltic states or the Baltics that become, vulnerable. This is what's happening in Guyana, because a larger, more powerful nation is taking over a smaller nation. This is what's happening I don't think this is part and parcel with Israel and what's going on with Gaza, with trying to displace people or whatever's going on there. But that right there is going to last forever, because that's been going on for thousands of years in the first place. So that one is going to be a tougher one. But then you have to look at what's going to happen with Taiwan and China. Is China going to go in and take Taiwan? Then you have the other smaller, land and power grabs. So I think, and this is why, the Ukraine-Russia one is that first domino, and that one cannot fall. Because if that falls, then that's going to allow for the other things. But I don't think this leads into a giant world war, because these are just land grabs and power grabs in particular areas that seem to be going on, more so than, hey, let me attack everywhere else. Because I do honestly think if Putin does take Russia or take Ukraine, there are other areas that he's going to try and take. But he's going to be specific in trying to take those to increase, yes, Russia's presence and all this other stuff. But it's a domino that cannot fall, and I don't think it leads to a world war. It's just power and land grabs.
Sasha, you had a thought?
And Jacoby, one of the reasons that Putin attacked Ukraine was to grab Ukraine, if possible, all of it, or just a major part of it, and so on. But that's not the main reason why he started the war. The main reason is he wants to humiliate the West and prove that the Western doctrine of NATO and collective defense systems or so on, it's nothing but noise. It doesn't exist. And the only thing, what he miscalculated is the fierce resistance of Ukrainians. He never counted on that. And recently, 2-3 weeks ago, he lamented that if he would know so much about Ukraine and NATO and the United States, he would never attack Ukraine. He would start it with the Baltic states and Poland and trying to get to Germany as soon as possible, because it's much easier prey than Ukraine. Ukraine maybe is not as powerful as the Western countries as economics concerned or so on, but they're very fearful fighters, and it's very difficult to overcome them. So why would you fight somebody who is so fearless fighter and who will fight you every inch of its territory and kill as many people as they can, when you can easily go to Baltic states? The total population of Baltic states probably less than 5 million people. So what they can rely on Article 5 of NATO. But what exactly is Article 5? I spent some time studying it. They would start if, let's see, one of NATO countries is attacked by non-NATO countries. So first of all, first 24 hours, that country has to fight itself the best they can. How they can fight for 24 hours, Russian army, remains to be seen. I'm not so convinced that they will fight for 24 hours. They would be able to fight for 24 hours. Most likely not, but let's assume that they will. Then they will start, on the second day, they will start consultation, whether this attack is real, whether this attack against all NATO and how they should react. Maybe they should start negotiate with invaders. Maybe they will start this and that. So before the NATO would actually fight an invader, we are talking about months, maybe a longer time, and maybe by that time that Baltic states would no longer exist. And therefore, I don't know what NATO in this case is going to do, that exclude them from the membership. Or let's say Russia will grab them all. There will be no more Baltic states. So they're technically still members of NATO, but they don't no longer exist. How are they going to solve that?
That would be an interesting question. But Sasha, the other thing that you have on the show that you do on Tuesdays and Fridays is the title is Ukraine, Russia, and China. And y'all just mentioned the term earlier, land grab, and all along those lines. So I was just wondering, do you think, and this is for everybody on the panel, that we need to be concerned both here in the West as well as just around even some of those NATO countries, the land grab that I feel is going on, which is that the Chinese government and the Chinese population and even Chinese businessmen are grabbing up a lot of property throughout the world and throughout the African nations and even Western cities and a number of other places. So I don't hear a lot of media talk about this. I did sometime back, but I haven't heard that recently. So are y'all concerned at all about this Asian business land grab? Because it does seem like that's going on both in Africa and other places as well, where they are definitely getting a lot of properties in these various parts of the world.
Well, China is, I don't see how China won't become the world's dominant nation over the next century. They have tremendous industrial capacity, more than 200 cities with more than 1 million population. And they've brought all this, they've got a dictatorial government that also wants their people to live well. And so they brought the people out of the countryside into the cities, and they have 4 times our population. They have high education levels. They can be patient. They can do what you're talking about. They can buy up stuff. Under Trump, when the U.S. pulled back in foreign relations, China stepped forward to be the world's friend. China doesn't want war. China, I'm sure, can look at the future and see that it belongs to them because of their economic power.
The only thing I'll say is I think, honestly, it'll most likely be India more than China, because India has invested more in the tech world than China has. China has actually just taken more of the tech rights and, basically stolen ideas and so on and so forth. But India is the tech giant where, whenever you call for tech help, where are you going? And, when you hire somebody doing tech work. So India has invested a whole lot in that area. And they honestly have more people in terms of population than China.
India and China combined have 8 times the U.S.'s population. India has dysfunctional government, kind of the way we do. If they ever get their act together, then yeah, they will. The future belongs to those 2 big ass countries.
And along those same lines, just really quickly, we only got about 5 more minutes to go and everything. But Sasha, one of the things that, and you've even mentioned it on shows before, that I have always thought about Russia is that Russia seems to be, in my mind, and maybe it's the same thing with China, too widespread. Because outside of Moscow and St. Petersburg and maybe one or two other cities, it is such a big landmass that I'm not even sure how they are able to control that big landmass, because it is a big landmass that is very spread out and doesn't seem to have a lot of true urban areas. Is that a misconception on my part? Are there more urban areas than I'm thinking there are, or is it pretty much the two that I mentioned and maybe one or two others?
But the huge landmass that exists in Russia, it's not too difficult to control because there are virtually no people there. If you take Siberia, there are no people. There are a little bit here and there, some local tribes and so on. It's not too difficult to control. In fact, you don't need it to control because there is nothing happening. So why would you control something that there is nothing happening? Now, the population of Russia is at its core, it's very aggressive, and they indeed want to overcome all the adversaries, whether it's United States or Western Europe or so on. Look, they agree to side with all Muslim countries or so on. Why do they love Muslims? Not really. But they love anybody who is an enemy of the United States. That's the only reason for existence of BRICS. And Russia is one who actually organized it. Back in 2008, 9, that was their idea. And they slowly, first it was 4 countries, South African, they joined much later. At first it was Russia, China, India, and Brazil. And that's quite powerful alliance if you take the population size, the economies put together, or so on. China economy alone is quite powerful. And if you add Brazil, if you add India and Russia, you cover enormous part of the territories, the population, and it just matter of time when that will yield certain results, especially what they're working now. And they didn't just start it. That's now a number of years, the creation of a gold-based currency. And Russia is quite large gold producer, but so is South Africa is even bigger. The half of the gold mined today, half of it is in South Africa. So you can imagine what's going to happen with the US dollar if it will be cornered by this gold-based currency. It's probably will take some time, probably 5, maybe 10 years. First, they will use this currency to trade among themselves. Then they will ask other countries who are selling something or buying from BRICS countries, they would ask them to pay in that new gold-based currency. Let's see if France wants to buy something from Russia or Brazil or China, and they will demand payment in that currency. So they will have to buy it on the world market. So they will start trading in that currency. Then you will compare that currency valuation to US dollars and to euros. And I'll tell you, in 5-10 years, the situation could be very different. So if answering to David Walker question whether US will be a superpower in 2040, there are a lot of reasons to say that probably not.
It's been interesting because I know one of the other stories that I mentioned earlier, and we get ready to wrap up, is the notion of Argentina devaluing their money by 50%. And as I said in my opening, I can only imagine the reaction of the American public if that was to happen here and everything. So I imagine Argentina will have a similar kind of thought and all along those lines. And just real quickly, and I'll let folks go round robin and if they've got any final thoughts on this particular edition of World Edition. But the other thing that I was going to mention, because we did talk about abortion on yesterday, is apparently the Supreme Court will be hearing a challenge to the abortion pill access. So that was something that I was going to get to and might get to tomorrow. And the New Mexico Supreme Court is to consider a obscure 1873 law used to ban abortion, and the Moms for Liberty co-founder has been asked to resign by Florida school board. So we may get to some of those discussions on tomorrow's World Edition and all along those lines. But just really quickly, and if everybody gives maybe a minute of thought as we get ready to wrap up, because we're already at the hour and everything. So I'll start with you, Rick, since you were the first one in the door.
Well, I mean, the Democrats are using their standard wimpy strategy of standing back and letting the Republicans melt down into their own idiocy. We'll see if that works. I just wanted to say Russia has had centuries of crappy government, has half our population, has the lowest life expectancy of any of the developed countries. And if Russia ever has good governance, they could become, powerful again. But right now they're mired in. Anyway, go ahead. Somebody
Well,
else.
I'll defer to Age. I'll close out with Sasha, if that's all right with you. So, Jacoby, if you've got any final thoughts, and then I'll let Sasha have the last word and everything. But Jacoby, any closing thoughts or anything that you want to say before we get ready to wrap up World Edition and do Modern Investment at 1 o'clock?
I was just going to jump back to where Steve had started with the whole AI thing, because the crazy thing about it, just recently, a group of Northwestern engineers put together, they had AI create an actual robot that could walk on a flat surface in a very simple design. So now AI is creating that. But then you also have to take into account, and this is all sci-fi stuff, but this is real world things that are happening. They've created self-healing metals, and they've also created liquid metal that can liquid metal robot that can travel through an actual prison. I mean, it's a small little tiny thing, but the fact that it can actually move through a prison bar cell that they created around it is kind of freaky to think about. Because yes, Terminator, how we think about the liquid metal stuff that happened there, that's all on the way. It's scary, but it's on the way.
Gotcha. Sasha, any final thoughts before I hit this World Edition intro, outro button and everything? But definitely any final thoughts just about world news. And of course, we'll be back on Thursday and Friday with more conversation. Don't think we have any guests this week, but we might have some next week. But any final thoughts that you want to share, and really quickly?
Well, very quickly is what's happened now between Ukraine and the United States and NATO. It's a huge setback for Western values. It's not only the material fact that the help is not going to forthcoming, whether it's weapons or money or both or whatever. It's not the point. The point is that Ukraine was relying in its policy on continuous help from the West, because 90% of the money, whatever is coming from the United States, remains in the United States. It doesn't leave the United States. It's going to the weapons manufacturers and creates a lot of well-paying jobs. And actually, a lot of those industries are, believe it or not, in Republican states. So what this is a complete calamity of American thinking, the politics. It's a completely bankrupt situation for the United States. And I think they will lose a lot in the foreign affairs department. And it's already evident that a lot of people now around the world, they don't fear America anymore. They already see the huge weakness of America. And for example, even Israel, who is a great friend of the United States for so many years, now they're openly oppose whatever Biden says, that there should be a ceasefire and this or that. They say no, there will be no ceasefire until we'll decide if and when we're going to do it. In the meantime, Israel is preparing attacks against Hezbollah. And it doesn't matter whether the U.S. will help Israel from military point of view. U.S. is militarily, they are castrated. They cannot do anything because they're scared. I had it on my show yesterday with Shaquille. We had conversation that U.S. is scared as hell of Russia and the Russian, the nuclear power. And okay, you can be scared, but you don't show it so openly, for Christ's sake. No, U.S. is showing how scared they are. So Russian can actually demand anything from U.S. simply by telephone calls. They even don't have to invade U.S. or fight U.S. or do anything. Just make it a telephone call. That in 24 hours, unless you do this and that, we will unleash 1,500 warheads on New York, Denver, Washington, Seattle, and actually all other cities. How about that? So you don't conduct this. They don't have politicians of a level of Churchill or Ronald Reagan or Margaret Thatcher. So they don't have. They have just little Bidens and Johnsons and all this garbage. And this is why U.S. foreign policy today is a joke, and there will be consequences.
Interesting concept and interesting thoughts and everything. We're going to wrap up on that note and all along those lines. And like I said, we've got Modern Investment. We've got other shows coming, including one around the weed industry with Jeff Eichen and Weed Wednesday later on this afternoon as well. But right now, we're going to get on out of here. And I look forward to seeing Sasha. Rick's become a regular as well. So hopefully we'll see Rick tomorrow also. And of course, Jacoby and maybe even Shaquille and Kim and others. But right now, we're going to get on out of here. And I look forward to seeing all of you gentlemen on tomorrow and on Friday as well. But right now, we're getting ready to get on out of here.
Bye.